On this episode, we visit Portland, Oregon for the 25th anniversary of the Downtown Plan. While we are there, we drop in on the annual meeting of Neighborhoods USA. Then we head east to the Mississippi River at St. Louis, where the abandoned Route 66 Chain of Rocks Bridge is being converted into the longest pedestrian bridge in the nation. Finally, we look at some road designs that are good for pedestrians. Stay tuned. We're talking with Rod Oheiser, who's an architect who worked on the Downtown Plan. They're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Downtown.
Anniversary, the silver anniversary.
Just what is the Downtown Plan?
Well, the Downtown Plan is a plan that embodies several different elements: housing, retailing, historic preservation, improved transit, location of office buildings by density, governmental center, cultural facilities, all of the things you'd like to see in downtown that many cities do not have today. We've lost a lot of this. So we tried to bring back things that we're losing and to introduce more improvements. For instance, the cultural center.
And how did the idea for the Downtown Plan get started?
Well, it was an idea of a couple of people: Lloyd Keefe, the former planning director, Dick Ivey, a consultant for a consulting firm, CH2M, and governmental leaders felt it was time, and the downtown business community, which financed the preparation of the plan.
And 25 years, has the plan been accomplished?
Largely it has. So we probably would like to see a little more housing, but one of the basic goals of the plan was to have a 24-hour city. In 1970, when the plan was undertaken, there was hardly anyone in downtown on Saturday after work. On the weekends. Now it's the reverse. We've kind of more or less realized this goal of having a city after hours and on weekends.
So where do you go from here? Is housing the big thing now?
Well, we go from here to look at areas adjacent to downtown: North Macadam, the River District, the Near East Side, and the Lloyd Center District.
We're talking with Vera Katz, the mayor of Portland, Oregon. You just celebrated the 25th anniversary of your Downtown Plan. What has the plan meant for the city?
Well, the plan meant a lot for the city. It meant bringing citizens down to the downtown by building opportunities to shop. It built housing so people can live downtown. It created the waterfront park so people can play downtown. It created a transit mall so people could get out of their cars. But more important, it created an environment for people to walk, to see other people, to visit, to watch the sun, and get a sense of closeness to their community.
So walking is important for a city?
Walking is critical for the city. And when we have visitors coming in from other parts of the country and the world, they say, you know, your city is very walkable. And I ask them, well, what do you mean by that? And they say exactly what I thought they would say, is that it's got a close proximity to the street, to the first floor of buildings, so people can relate to activity going on outside, Nordstrom's, Meyer & Frank's, Starbucks, as well as inside, as opposed to blank brick buildings with no windows and nothing happening. So it's that pedestrian landscape that's so critical for this city.
Where do you go from here? What do you do to build on top of this?
Oh, we have big plans. First of all, we're extending the central city. The downtown became the central city, and the central city is now being extended north to the River District, south to North Macadam. We're studying 10th and 11th because the trolley car will run on 10th and 11th. We're looking at covering I-405 so we can create other pedestrian and people places. And we're crossing the river, and we're going to build a park across the river. And we're looking at the Rose Quarter and developing the Rose Quarter as well as our neighborhoods.
And they're all going to be walkable?
I hope so. As long as I'm here, they're going to be walkable because I don't drive.
We're talking with Commissioner Charlie Hales of the City of Portland, Oregon. What was Portland like before the downtown plan?
Well, some say you could have shot a cannon down the street at 6:30 or 7 o'clock at night and not hit anyone. And that was probably the story of most American cities in that era, that people were leaving the downtowns, they were moving to suburbia, they were building new malls out there where people did their shopping, and new theaters where they did their entertainment, and just maybe coming downtown to work in an office during the day, but then at 5 o'clock roll up the sidewalks, everybody goes home. And that's what Portland was like. It was also pretty dingy. A lot of the historic buildings were in decline or at best in benign neglect. This building had a lot of window air conditioners and bad paneling and peeling paint because it was 75 years old and had not gotten much attention. And there weren't very many street trees downtown, so there wasn't much greenery. So it was a pretty dismal, uninteresting, unattractive place. And yet the physical setting of our city, with the hills behind us and Mount Hood to the east, and some of the great old buildings here, gave people some cause for energy and for hope, and said, we can do better than this. So let's get the retailers to come back downtown. Let's get transit in here so we can get more activity on our streets, and let's try to get some commercial development on the ground floor of new buildings instead of the concrete canyons of office buildings that just start at the sidewalk and go to the heavens with no differentiation. And those are the kinds of strategies that were started in the mid-1970s when we adopted the downtown plan and did things like talking Nordstrom into moving downtown, building a transit mall, starting a light rail system, and beginning to require new development to have storefront retail at ground level. So we were pretty much like most American cities, but we said, that's not good enough, we want to be better than that, and set about doing it.
How does your downtown plan fit in with some of the other plans like the pedestrian master plan?
Our approach, really important one, is to try to build a different kind of environment than prevails in suburbia or that prevails in most American cities. And that is, we want our downtown and our neighborhoods to be walkable. We want commerce where people live, not to have this separation that American zoning has so often pushed upon us, that only shop here, only live there, only work somewhere else. So we have tried to make sure through our pedestrian plan that we have a consistent effort at making the city more pedestrian friendly. We have an urban forestry plan to replant street trees all along city streets and even downtown streets as well. And we have a bicycle master plan that makes sure that we have a connected network of bikeways all over the city to get people to and from the downtown and to and from other neighborhood destinations. So if you sum up our transportation policy, it's really all about choice. We want to give people more choices to be able to choose other than driving to make many of the trips of daily life. And then when it comes to design and land use, it's really about livability and human scale, and not conceding the development of the city to national stereotypes, just as we don't concede the public realm, the streets, the boulevards, solely to the automobile.
How important has the urban growth boundary been for the success of the downtown plan?
The urban growth boundary is very important. Without that, I think a lot of what we've succeeded at here would simply not have been possible. Part of it is market forces, and that is, if you have a limit on the amount of land available for land development, it does tend to reinforce values in existing areas. But a bigger part, maybe the more important part, is psychological, and that is, if the developers and their customers, including home buyers, are oriented that way, going farther and farther out all the time, to the next subdivision, the next strip mall, the next regional mall, the next interchange on the freeway, the odds that they're ever going to turn around and look back at the city they're fleeing from are very low. And that's the orientation of real estate in much of this country, is let's go a little bit farther out, buy a little cheaper land, and beat the next guy on our lease rates by the fact that our development is just a little bit cheaper than the one that they're in up the road. It's a terribly destructive pattern. If you have an urban growth boundary, then one message is essentially, this stops. The other message is, you know, you really ought to look back and see what's behind you. And in fact, a lot of the real estate community here has done that. Some still grumble and say, oh, the urban growth boundary is costing me business. Most of them, business people are adaptable, have turned around and said, well, how can I make money back there? Well, maybe, you know, there's a surface parking lot over next to that office building. Maybe I'll build another office building there instead of out in the burbs. Or looks like there's some people who want to live downtown or live close in one of these city neighborhoods. Maybe we could build a mixed-use building with, you know, ground floor retail and 3 or 4 stories of housing over that. And boy, you know, looks like there are a lot of people working downtown now. Maybe we'll build an urban mall in the heart of the city rather than a suburban mall surrounded by acres of parking lot somewhere out in the suburbs. And that's exactly what the real estate community has done here. They have adapted to this environment. They're still making money, and of course we want them to prosper. This is not just a social experiment here. We want it to be a successful market experiment as well. So our real estate community has turned around and figured out how to make it work in the city. And I don't think they ever would have done that but for having an urban growth boundary that in effect set some new rules for the game.
And you look around for examples similar to Portland, and you think of some Canadian cities, you know, Vancouver, British Columbia, Toronto, or maybe some European cities. Are there other American cities that have used the Portland example?
There is a little bit of urbanism breaking out around the country, and there is a city renaissance underway, and we're glad to see it, in part because we love stealing ideas from other places, and we've been assiduously doing that in places like Vancouver, British Columbia, and Toronto, and cities in Europe. So we'd love to have more places to steal ideas from. But it's still only a beginning movement, I think, a nascent movement in the rest of the country. There are a few places that have done some successful signature projects in their downtowns. There are some others that have done a good job of general downtown revitalization. Baltimore, Denver, Cincinnati come to mind. And then there are a few experiments in what's called the new urbanism, places that are specifically designed as new communities to be walkable, pedestrian, mixed-use environments from the beginning. Places like Seaside and Celebration, Florida, Kentlands, Maryland. There are a number of places around the country where these ideas of the so-called new urbanism, really not new at all. In fact, they themselves call it traditional neighborhood development. Those ideas are starting to crop up all over the country, and people are finding out that not only do they look nice and make great stories in Architectural Digest, but they do very well in the marketplace. People will pay more for good design, and that goes for a well-designed community as well as a well-designed house or office building. So there's some new movement, some new momentum around the country, and we celebrate that here in Portland because, frankly, to an extent, we felt like an outpost of good design and good planning for much of the last 25 years. We'd love to have some more company and maybe even some competition.
And some people might have thought the urban growth boundary might strangle the city. Has the population been growing?
Well, the population's been growing. 75 more people will have dinner here tonight than had breakfast here this morning. But it has also done very well for us financially. We are a very prosperous city, and we are prosperous because we reinforced the value of real estate with an urban growth boundary, caused people to invest in an efficient way in terms of their location. And now real estate here is very valuable, industries here are very productive, the unemployment rate is very low, and the quality of life here is very high. Those things go together. A lot of the industry that has moved here and invested here has done so because of the quality of life. And they wouldn't have seen that quality of life if we'd squandered the land by not having urban growth boundaries and not having land use planning. So Intel, Wacker Siltronics, some of these other major employers here, the corporate headquarters like Nike and Pacific Gas Transmission that are here because of lifestyle and the quality of life. And having an urban growth boundary that organizes the place and having comprehensive land use and transportation planning that makes the place livable represents real value to those companies, and they've reciprocated by investing here and making us a very prosperous community.
If other American cities decide they like the Portland example and want to do what you've done, what advice could you offer them?
Well, I would say, first of all, that programs and institutions really aren't portable. Don't come to Oregon or go to Vermont or go to Hawaii or anywhere else with a land use planning system and expect to pick up that whole institution and transplant it somewhere else. I see very little sign that that's feasible. But I do see an ability to pick ingredients and ideas and synthesize them in your own way back at home. And that's what we've done. We've borrowed here, borrowed there, and put together our own recipe. But I think the message of Portland to the rest of the country is not, oh, you should come to Portland and imitate slavishly what we've done. Put in place this kind of urban growth boundary, that kind of zoning ordinance, and that kind of light rail. No, that's not the message. The message is you don't have to be like every place else. We looked around 25 years ago, saw a great city fading away into the geography of nowhere, fading away into a downtown that looks pretty much as tired and as unattractive as every other downtown in the United States in the 60s and 70s. And we said, no, wait a minute, we want to do something better than that. And that's the message. You can do this. We weren't magicians. We didn't have divine insight. We simply put together a good plan and stuck to it. So that would be my counsel to anyone in my position or as a community activist anywhere else in the country, is figure out your own vision for your own future, write it down, and stick to it. Make sure that your plans and policies and your budgets follow that vision, and then stick to it long enough to realize it, because you can consciously improve your community and be someplace distinctive. But first you have to decide that you're going there and figure out what that destination looks like. It won't look like Portland. It'll look like Cincinnati or Chicago or Spokane or some other city that's different from us, has a different history and a different geography and a different character. But it's important to figure out what that geography and character is and then try to reinforce it, rather than let national trends and standardized models of development just obliterate your uniqueness and make you a part of the geography of nowhere. So this is, you can do this, is the message. That's probably my counsel, the cheer I would try to lead to the rest of the country, is you can do this, but you need to find out what your own unique mixture will be in your community and then make it happen.
We're talking with George Manning, who's president of the board of Neighborhood USA. What is Neighborhoods USA?
Neighborhoods USA is an organization that was founded back in 1975 by Howard Hallman and Judy LaFoon. Kind of grew out of a foundation grant that they received from the Ford Foundation to look at collaborative efforts of communities at the grassroots level and how they can become involved more in the political process. Neighborhoods USA is also an organization that promotes stronger communities. We try to pull together collaborative efforts between government and grassroots citizens, as well as other agencies at state and local levels.
And you're just finishing up, or I guess in the middle actually, of your conference here in Portland, Oregon.
That's correct.
Would you say the conference has been a success so far?
I would think that so far the conference is meeting our expectations. It has exceeded our expectations in one way, in that the numbers, we have maximized the number of people at 1,000, which is the total capacity of the facility that they could hold. And this is the first time we have reached that level of participation for this organization. I'm sure that in the future we'll keep that in consideration so that we don't have to turn people away.
So do you think this indicates an increasing interest in neighborhoods and neighborhood associations?
Yes, I think the increased interest in neighborhoods across the country has regenerated itself. Many communities are making new initiatives as far as neighborhoods are concerned. They're realizing that neighborhoods, people within the neighborhoods and neighborhood associations are an integral part of their community and the political process. The elected officials in different communities are also recognizing this particular fact, that neighborhoods make a difference because they are their constituency.
And you're entering the 21st century. You now have a web presence. Someone wants to find out more about you. Where do they go on the internet?
Well, yes, we're trying to keep up with technology on the internet. It's www.nusa.org. So that's www.nusa.org.
We're talking with Ted Curtis, who's Executive Director of TrailNet. What is TrailNet?
TrailNet is a nonprofit land trust. A land trust is an organization that acquires and develops land for public use. We specialize in bike trails and greenways and pedestrian type things in the St. Louis metropolitan area.
And what are some of the projects you've done so far?
Well, of course, the biggest is the Chain of Rocks Bridge right now, which we're standing on. We're involved in a rail trail conversion in one part of the county, which is a 6-mile corridor, which we're converting to a bike path, walking path. We're also involved in some programming type of things. We're working with encouraging bicycle and pedestrian use for transportation issues to get people to use a bike or walk in lieu of a car. We're also involved in opening up the river, the Mississippi River, to bike and pedestrian and tourist type use.
And how did all these trails fit together? Do they form a network?
Well, eventually they'll form a network. Bits and pieces are coming together right now. The biggest network that's happening is the bike paths along the Mississippi River, that pieces of that are just falling into place. And of course, the Chain of Rocks is a big connector in it. Bridges downtown can be a connector. So the network is happening along the river, along the Mississippi River.
How did TrailNet get started? What was the inspiration behind it?
Actually, about 10 years ago, Mayor of St. Louis decided that he wanted to put a bike path along the Mississippi on the St. Louis side, just in the city, and formed TrailNet as an advocacy group for that bike path. We've been working on that for the last 10 years, and at the time, we decided that there was a regional need for bike paths and trails and that type of thing. So we talked to the city of St. Louis, and they said, yeah, a regional charter is fine. So we took on a regional charter, and we've been looking at the regional type of things ever since.
Learn more at www.trailnet.org. We're talking with Carlene McAllister, who's project manager for the Chain of Rocks Bridge. When was this bridge built?
This bridge was started in 1927, finished in 1929. And it operated as a toll bridge. It was a huge source of revenue for the city of Madison. It closed in 1968 because of a bridge about 500 feet north of here. It's a bigger bridge. It was a free bridge. Could carry traffic. It didn't have the magic turn into bridge like this one did, so it wasn't a problem for traffic.
So what's happened to it since it was closed?
Okay, it sat vacant for 30 years. There were big piles of dirt at the entrances, keeping people out. Kids would climb over at night. You know, it'd be kind of a party place. But it just sat here. There are a lot of plans to tear it down. I think in the 70s they were going to tear it down and cash in on the steel, and the bottom fell out of the steel prices. It saved the bridge. It cost more to tear it down than they would get from recycling the steel. So it's like fate kind of had a hand in keeping this bridge alive and keeping it here till today.
How did TrailNet get involved with it?
Well, our executive director, Ted Curtis, had this vision back in the late 80s, early 90s. People laughed at him. He said, let's make it into a bicycle bridge. And he kept persisting. And it wasn't until like February of 97 that we got a lease with the city of Madison. And before that time, we started some initial cleanup work, getting the vines off the bridge, clearing away the dirt. But we officially started construction at the fall of 1997. We've been concentrating on major renovations, structural renovations. We've been replacing bearings. As you can see, that there's a lot of patching in the deck. We've fixed all the holes. We replaced some of the steel rails that were bent. And a lot of the work you can't see. We had one of the main piers was cracked. We had to put a band around it and fill it with epoxy to keep water from freezing and recracking it. So right now we're in real good structural place, and we're going on. We've got about 3 more things we want to do before we open the bridge.
When do you expect to finally open it then?
We're hoping to open it in late September. We want to get the curb repaired. We want to put paint on the rails to keep the children away from the lead-based paint. and then we want to put a fence up. We got those 3 projects, pretty big projects when you talk about doing it over a mile span. And then we will open the bridge, and then we will work on doing the amenities in phase 2.
So the plans for phase 2, amenities, what are we talking about?
Oh, we're talking benches, we're talking planters. We hope they have bathroom facilities, approaches to both sides, parking lots, all the neat little things that will make this into a park.
What makes a residential street pedestrian friendly? The answer isn't new. In fact, many of the best ones were built back in the 1920s. We're at the corner of Goddard and Maple Ridge in Bethesda, Maryland, where the streets are only 20 feet wide with parking on one side. When 2 cars meet, they have to take turns getting by. The narrow width has a number of advantages. It slows down traffic, and it reduces the distance pedestrians must cross. Contrast this with the excessively wide streets in many newer subdivisions. Having a narrower street also frees up space for a planting strip and sidewalks. An 8-foot planting strip next to the road provides a place to plant shade trees. It also provides a comfortable separation between pedestrians on the sidewalk and cars on the street. When the narrow streets meet, the corners are kept very tight. In engineering terms, the radius here is only 5 feet. With sharp corners, the intersection is kept small, and pedestrians don't have as far to cross. Also, cars turning the corner have to slow down, reducing the danger to pedestrians. Many newer streets are built with wide, sweeping corners, lengthening the distance that pedestrians must cross, at the same time increasing the speed of the turning cars they confront during the crossing. Finally, the curb cuts at this intersection are built as a continuous part of the sidewalk and crosswalk. There are 2 at each corner facing the crosswalks. A wheelchair user, a parent with a stroller, or a child on a bicycle is directed towards the crosswalk. Many newer corners have just a single curb cut facing the center of the intersection. This directs pedestrians that use it away from the crosswalks and into danger. Even an alert driver seeing a pedestrian on a single curb cut cannot tell which crosswalk he plans to use. Street width, planting strips, tightness of corners, and orientation of curb cuts may seem like small details, but it is the details that make the difference between a street that welcomes pedestrians and a street that barely tolerates pedestrians.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.